Email is vastly undervalued, I think, by most companies out there. And to me, it's really the holy grail, right? It's the ability to connect directly with a person in a personal space of their inbox.
A relationship with the right referral partner could be a game changer for any B2B company. So what if you could reverse engineer these relationships at a moment's notice? Start a podcast, invite potential referral partners to be guests on your show, and grow your referral network faster than ever. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. My name is Ethan Butte, co-host of the Customer Experience series here on the show. Customer experience is the single most valuable and important thing that we're producing and delivering every single day as individuals, as teams, and as companies. But when you think about it, it encompasses every single touch point a person might have with us and our brand and our company and our product and our service. And so it includes marketing, it includes sales, it includes customer success and service and support and beyond. So how do we manage that well? How do we create a holistic experience in order to convert leads, to satisfy and onboard customers successfully, to get them to their desired outcomes, and to move them toward advocacy for repeat and referral business? That's what this series is all about. And first up here is Ann Handley, keynote speaker, author, and an excellent writer in general. I've read both of her books. I highly recommend Everybody Writes. We talk about customer experience at Marketing Profs. We talk about their new brand and brand experience. And we get some great insights into people and companies who she respects for what they've contributed to marketing in general and to customer experience in particular. I hope you enjoy the episode. Ann Handley, welcome to the Customer Experience Podcast.
Thank you so much, Ethan. That was very generous. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, we were just chatting before we hit record about, you used the word gift, and so much of what you produce really is and has been for me. And I think a lot of people who are doing work or seeing the world like I do. So thank you so much for everything you produce and share. And thanks for joining me today.
I'm delighted we could make this work.
Yeah. So I always like to start because, one of my motivations for starting this podcast, I think customer experience is one of those words and concepts that everyone says, yes, I know what it means, but everyone has a different understanding. So part of my own curiosity, how do you regard customer experience? When you hear the phrase, how do you think about it? Or what does it mean? What are some of its characteristics?
That is buzzwordy, isn't it?
It is.
It's one of those words like authenticity that everybody is like, that, marketers are always, oh, sure, of course, we know what that means. Of course, we're authentic. Of course, we're providing a good brand experience or customer experience. To me, it's everything that a customer experiences with us, and I think in marketing, we tend to think of the customer experience as only the things that we can control. But to me, it's everything. It's the way somebody answers the phone. It's the email that goes out. If you have a storefront, it's how they're greeted when somebody comes through the front door. It's the way that your website functions. It's all of those things. It's so many things. So it involves not just marketing, but it involves, the front lines in a retail experience. It involves customer service. Hugely involves customer service. It involves sales, and it's all across the organization. So it's not just a thing that marketing, I think, can affect, but I think marketing can set the tone as well.
Right. How deep in the operations? I should have mentioned that you're the Chief Content Officer at Marketing Profs and been involved for many, many years there. Are you involved in operations enough to speak to customer experience? Like, is that a concept inside the organization? Do you talk and think in those terms, or are you even upstream from that?
Both. I mean, we're not a massive organization. We're not Amazon or Apple, right? And so, and I'm very much the face of marketing props, I guess. The chief content officer. I'm also a managing partner, so it's not solely mine, but I also have a sort of outsized role, I guess, compared to some of my colleagues. So yeah, I think about customer experience all the time, even with the things that, or especially with the things that I'm directly responsible for. Like for example, I own the Twitter handle, right? I'm at Marketing Profs on Twitter, which is kind of unusual. I don't know very many other business to business brands who actually have a person who's an actual shareholder of the company who's representing the company on a major social platform, right? I mean, maybe they exist. If they do, I bet I could count them on, 2 fingers, right?
Right.
And so I'm very aware, like in those situations, that, I'm representing a brand and that everybody who comes into contact with me there is experiencing something about marketing props. They have some notion of what marketing props is based on just a quick interaction with me, So yes, I think about it all the time. I think about it in terms of the business, the B2B forum that we run every year. This year it's in DC in October. So the experience that we're creating there, that's something we spend an enormous amount of time on, because there are a million marketing conferences that people can spend their dollars at, that you can go to. But we try to create an experience that feels different. Like I want everybody who walks into that hotel in National Harbor this October to sort of, I want their shoulders to drop and I want them to go, okay, this feels different. This doesn't feel like an event that can be put on by anybody else. So yes, I think of the things that I touch personally. And then I also think more broadly, just across the organization, how are we interacting with people? Our customer service person, for example, a woman by the name of Shelly Ryan, she's fantastic. Mm-hmm. We call her the customer service ninja, because she has a sense of what people need before they even need it. And she's fantastic.
There's trouble over there. Let's go.
Yeah. She puts on some face and she does that. No, she's amazing. And so, yeah, we think a lot about experience, because for a company our size, it's a differentiator.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Obviously, content, which is your expertise, I would say. I think you might say the same thing. And by the way, to the Twitter handle, I knew you first as Marketing Profs before I knew you as Ann Handley.
Yeah, I have both. True.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm just in my experiencing the brand and then coming to understand who you were and your role in it and all of that. As a content expert, speak a little bit to content's role in that experience. Obviously, you described it from the beginning through the end. Mm. You talked about a live experience as part of the brand. You talked about social. Content obviously plays all the way along there, but can you speak to the role of content in serving and building up and characterizing the customer experience?
Yeah, so content isn't a separate thing from any of those things, right? It's embedded in every experience. So content is the Twitter handle. Content is the programming at B2B. It's all of those things. It's the way that somebody experiences the articles when they come to our website, which is why we have an editor who's actually editing the articles that appear on the website. We have a newsletter editor because we care about even things like typos and headlines. We want to make sure that it's crystal clear what the value is. And so all that to say, all of those things I think of as content. I don't think of content just as things that fit in a box, like an ebook or a white paper or a blog post or an infographic, right? So that said, so the role that content plays, the way that I think about it, is that it's always in service to the customer in one way or another. And yes, it represents the brand, right? Yes, it represents our point of view, but it should be communicating that point of view, that perspective to the customer in a way that's valuable to them. And so I know that's a lot of sort of words, but when I believe that, and when I play it out across all the different ways that we are touching customers, all across the customer experience, if you will, that's truly what we're trying to do. So we want to make sure that the articles, for example, that we run on our website, in our newsletter, that appear in our newsletter, the infographics, the podcast that my friend Carrie Gorgon hosts, all of that is furthering the brand, but it's also on the other side providing value to the person who's reading or listening or coming to our events or interacting on Twitter, right? And so there's those two things that I think you need to be aware of as a marketer. What is it doing for your brand? But then what is it also providing for the customer? And when those two things fit and when they actually when they actually are in service to both, that's to me is really the essence of great content.
That's great. You got to there. You said brand a couple times and even used it interchangeably. And that is part of my discovery process here over the course of, dozens and dozens of episodes. Like, what's the relationship there? Are they interchangeable? You talked about perspective and point of view across these various touch points and across various media. What's behind that for the Marketing Profs team? Is there a brand mission? Is there a set of stated values? Like, how is everyone, even though you described it as a small organization, how is everyone operating from and kind of breathing out and delivering kind of a shared perspective? Like, how do you all think about that? Do you have anything formal around that? Or is that just something that happens organically because you're a tight group and a smaller group?
Yeah. For us, it's a little bit of both. We don't have a binder on the shelf behind me here, that has our brand attributes and that has, we communicate in this kind of voice. I mean, we have all of these things, but in a way, but I think for us, it's a lot more organic. So in terms of, hiring people who we feel like really do fit with us culturally and who really can understand our perspective and our point of view, that's part of it. But in terms of what's the thing that knits us all together, as an organization, we relaunched Marketing Profs in September of 2018. So 6-ish months ago, I guess, now that I'm talking to you, 5 months ago, something like that, around the idea that learning can change your life. And we don't mean that as, this sort of pie in the sky kind of thing. We are a training and education company. We have been educating marketers since 2000. I joined in 2002. And so we've been on this trajectory for a very long time, but we've kind of codified what we do, not around this notion of learning changes lives. So it's not just about a random webinar, and it's not just about an article over here that helps you do something. It's not just about, the set of tools that you might be able to access here. It's really the bigger story that we're telling, if you will, the bigger ecosystem that I think we all are functioning under, and that knits all of those things together, is the idea that when you stay curious, when you are leaning forward, when you are looking to constantly be leveling up, it will change your life. And yes, in a Marketing Profs context, that relates to marketing, but it also relates to almost anything that we do, right, in our lives. And so that's really the I don't know, I guess the brand story, or what was the word that you used? It was, what's the thing that sort of holds all of us together, our mission or our perspective, that's ours.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned hiring team members. I'm going to assume that the better part of your last round of hires, however that's paced, probably came out of the community. People who already know who you are and what you're about.
Often. Yes, that is true. Yeah, it's funny because, we're not a massive organization. I think we're 24, I don't know, something like that. But yeah, a good example is Carrie Gorgone, right? Carrie hosts our podcast. She is also heavily involved in our training program. So she's on the training side. She's on the content side. She's sort of embedded throughout the organization. She does a lot of hosting for us, on webinars and so on. She's also a good friend of mine. I knew Carrie back when she was teaching at Full Sail University in Florida, when she lived in Florida. And so she and I interacted quite a bit on social, for example. I got to know her. And then ultimately, she came on as the part-time host or the contract host of the podcast. And then eventually, we figured out a way to hire her. So yeah, that kind of stuff happens a lot. And even but I'm trying to think of our last hires. It doesn't happen exclusively, but that's a good example of the kind of person who I think tends to do really well at Marketing Profs, because we're a virtual organization and it's not for everybody. Working out of your home office, where I am right now, or sometimes I work out of my tiny house in
home office, of course.
It's too snowy and cold right now, so I'm sticking upstairs in this little attic-y looking place. But it's not for everybody, and so it's hard to get a feel for culture when you're a distributed team like we are. And so the ability to be able to, sort of vet somebody and have a relationship with them before they come on board, I think that's hugely valuable.
Yeah, and it's a great way, again, just the point that we went off on there is to maintain this continuity of brand and experience. And let's switch gears a little bit. You've really helped define content marketing and best practices over the past, you said 2002 with Marketing Profs. What are some mistakes that you still see being made that you and other folks, your kin, have been identifying as like, let's put these practices to the side for years that are still in effect. Like for someone that's listening, like what should we stop doing that you still see happen? You've had your eye on it for 8 years now. You've been talking about it openly for 6, and yet it's still something that you see out there. What are some practical things someone can take away here?
Yeah. Ethan, I hate being negative. I hate going negative.
But, so what are some ways people could improve that's very easy, low-hanging fruit? Okay.
No, I get this question a lot.
Sure.
I'm speaking at an event this spring, for example, and they wanted me to talk about future trends in content, which is pretty much the worst topic for me to talk on. Not because I'm not aware of what's going on, but because there's so much stuff that's already available, that's out here now, that we're not taking full advantage of, or we're not fixing, or we're not doing right or well enough, And so the idea of talking about what's coming, whether it's like, voice or VR or the way that AI is, like what? Like, come on, man, let's like fix your email newsletter. Like, Let's start there. Or the other question I get, what's the up and coming social channel? What social channel should our brand be on? Which one should we be all in on? And it's like, none. Just stop. Like fix your email newsletter, right? Yeah. And I'm not saying that it has to be just the email newsletter, but email is vastly undervalued, I think, by most companies out there. And to me, it's really the holy grail, right? It's the ability to connect directly with a person in a personal space of their inbox. Most brands are using it as a distribution strategy. And I'm using air quotes, even though I hate using air quotes, but that's how they're using it, right? And so instead of actually respecting that as a place that's special, it's email is disrespected because we've made it a disrespected property. And so like that to me is the one thing that people are still getting wrong. That's so frustrating to me.
Yeah, I love your newsletter. I mean, we've talked a lot about marketing profs, but I just wanted to everyone who's made it into this point of the episode, Handley.com, subscribe to the newsletter. It's total anarchy. It is fortnightly, which for those of you that don't know what that means. And how did you land on fortnightly? Obviously, it's a fun word to say and probably to type, but
yes.
Why that cadence?
So fortnightly is, for those of you who don't know, it's every other week. And the reason I don't say biweekly is because biweekly has 2 interpretations, right? It's either every other week or it's twice a week. So
right.
I will not overwhelm you with an email twice a week, but every other week is the cadence. Fortnightly is because that's the only word that describes exactly every other week. So I don't think that was your question. That why did you choose the word fortnightly? It was more the cadence, right?
Yeah. Either way, I just want to. Through your newsletter, I've seen you speak. I've heard you on other podcasts. It's a very consistent experience. It's smart. It's witty without being too sassy, clever, an expert. And I think what you deliver, I feel like is really who you are, whether it's on Instagram, which is more personal and fun, whether it's in the newsletter, which you write very, very personally to people, to anyone that wants to see how to manifest a great, consistent experience across channels and across media. I encourage you to follow Ann in a personal way. Yeah. And in closing, at BombBomb and here on this podcast, we significantly value relationships. So I always like to end by giving you a chance to thank or mention someone who's had a really important role or valuable role in your life or in your career, and a shout out to a company that's doing customer experience or brand really well.
Oh man, geez, I didn't know I had to prep for this.
What are you feeling right now?
What am I feeling right now? I'll tell you, like the person who has had from a marketing standpoint, it's going to sound a little cliched, but I love what Seth Godin has done for his entire career. I am consistently impressed with him because he does so many things right, but he also does things wrong. And that's part of who he is, right? He's always challenging himself and experimenting. That's really what I strive to do as well. He writes every day, and that's incredibly important to him. And that alone is admirable. And it's something that I really admire. I guess I just said that twice. I aspire to, let me put it that way. He values writing. He publishes books, but he also, is trying new things, in terms of training programs that he's putting out. He's branched out of marketing a little bit. He just launched the business of food kind of training program. And so I have a lot of respect for him. And it does sound a little cliche, I guess, to mention, the sort of icon of marketing, but I have to, because he's truly the person who has inspired me probably the most from a marketing standpoint. In terms of, what was your other question? Oh, brands.
Yeah, company or brand, or, it could be a small shop in your town, or it could be an international brand.
Who's really inspired me from an experience perspective.
Yeah, who's doing it really well, who always leaves you with that feeling like, man, these people really get it.
I mean, it's a small company, but I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from it. It's a company called Baking Steel. They're located in Cohasset, Massachusetts, so just south of Boston, about an hour from me, because I'm north of the city, they're south. My friend Andres Lagston is the owner, and he only became my friend because I got a baking steel, which is a flat piece of metal. I got it for as a gift one year, and as a result, I sort of started looking into Andres. I followed him on Instagram. I started reading his blog. I started watching his videos, because it's like, what do I do with this flat piece of metal? I mean, I love to cook. I love to, cook for people, but it's like, what can I really do with this thing? How is this different from the clay, pizza stone that I already had? It turns out it was massively different. And the only reason why I know that, and why I'm such a fan of this company now, and why I have bought 3 other baking steels as gifts for other people, which, by the way, is a very generous gift, because these things are $119.
Okay.
Right? So I've spent, and now I'm into this company for, what?
4 figures easy.
Close to $400 personally out of my own pocket. And then, as well as, and I also bought a little mini baking steel. So the reason why is because Andres is authentic, that word that is so tough to really codify, but I think when you see it, you know it. He also provides a really consistent customer experience across everything. So, you mentioned my Instagram and my newsletter. It's exactly the same way with Andres. You feel him, you feel his personality, you feel like it's him writing, it's him posting on Instagram, it's him showing you this breakfast pizza that he made on Easter morning for his family, and it's fantastic. He also does an in-person experience, right? He built a test kitchen in his backyard. Jess, my assistant, and I went down and we did a pizza making class on a Thursday night with him. He invited us to come in. He assembles, 8 or 10 people every Thursday, and with the objective to just make pizza. And he's fantastic. He's just such a great example of how to do it right, combining online and in person, and using personality, using voice, which we really didn't talk about, but it's another big thing of mine, using voice to great effect, not just on his video, but it matches how it reads on Instagram, and it matches the blog and the site and everything else. So that consistent experience is woven through everything Andres does. And I think there's a lot that any size brand can really learn from that.
That's excellent. I love both of your answers, and agree with you on Seth Godin. For someone who bypassed for like, oh, everyone says that, I'm going to go deeper.
Yeah.
But it is important to recognize what's great. You're great. I really appreciate your time so much. For all the folks that want to go deeper on the variety of things we talked about, your website, your newsletter, your social marketing profs, where would you send someone?
Marketing Profs, you can go to marketingprofs.com. We send out a newsletter twice a week. We also have training programs about everything from email to content. We've got an in-person event in October, this October 16th through 18th, something like that. I should know that off the top of my head. I'm just blanking on it.
We got that clear.
In Washington, D.C. Yes, exactly. National Harbor. And then if you want to subscribe to my personal newsletter, which I would really appreciate, it's at annhandley.com/newsletter. And yeah, thank you for having me, Ethan. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. Learning can change your life. It's a great theme, and I feel like you live it. And I appreciate your time so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you. All right. Talk soon.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. If you would like to hear more from marketing, sales, and customer success experts on how they're creating and delivering better experiences for their customers, subscribe to the Customer Experience Podcast. You can find it at bombbomb.com/iTunes, bombbomb.com/Spotify, or just bombbomb.com/podcast. That's the word bomb, B-O-M-B twice, .com/podcast. My name is Ethan Butte, and thank you for listening.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.